Do you know, in starting this podcast recording over and over again, I keep thinking how great it would be if I could just start in the middle. And I know that's silly because how would that work? But I guess it's sort of like Caleb's thing of how he wants to skip the waking up part of every day. It's like the middle of a cake because that's where you get your slice and your first bite would be. Or the middle of a pizza, which again, same concept, and first bite, best bite. But I guess that's how I'm starting this. Today I'll be rambling on about how I see Amsterdam, I guess, and why I love it. In thinking about things I could speak about for 20-30 minutes, this was what came to my mind. So yeah, let's get into it. A few weeks ago, I had this realization, this revelation that Amsterdam, to me, is the city where dreams come true. And ever since this tagline emerged, I started saying it to people because it encapsulates quite well how I think and what I feel about the city. Not to mention that it's catchy and rolls off the tongue. And every time I have said this to someone, they've repeated it back to me in some way. When, engaging the conversation, like, oh, Amsterdam? And they all say, the city of dreams. And usually I brush it off and I just let them say that. But I've been thinking about it a lot. And there's quite an important distinction between the two for me. The city of dreams, to me, is a fictitious place. It's, it exists in your imagination. It's this perfect fantasy land that doesn't exist. But a city where dreams come true is a real place where things happen. And it's where I am here now, which is really just what I can't stress enough. What I didn't realize until I realized, but I suppose that's how all things are. What I didn't realize for a very long time was that most of my life, I stared at my feet when walking. I always watched the ground. And initially, I suppose it started because I've always been quite a clumsy person and I trip quite easily. So I'd watch the ground for wherever it would be uneven. And occasionally I'll stare at the pattern of the bricks and the tiles and walk in such a way to avoid the cracks. But I didn't realize how much I did this until there was this day when I was in Amsterdam where I suddenly challenged myself to look up when walking. And oh my God, was it so scary. It really felt like riding a bike for the first time. I couldn't see the ground immediately before me. And on top of that, everything was just so bright. And I guess that makes sense if you're constantly just watching the ground move beneath your feet, that if you look up and the sky is bright and things are literally bright. And I so vividly recall in those first few weeks of trying to train myself to look up when walking, how overwhelming everything could be. So many people, so many interesting styles, so many interesting buildings, and just such beautiful nature and so on and so forth. But it this is so silly, but it is such a special memory to me that this happened in Amsterdam, because I suppose the first city I actually started seeing somewhat properly was Amsterdam. For the longest time, for again most of my life, I never pictured a future. And I don't mean this in a depressing way. I'm going to try to say this as matters of fact as possible, but basically my whole life, it was my mom's big dream to send her children to overseas university eventually when the time came. And she didn't have a plan on how to do it, and I suppose I didn't have a picture of what it might look like. So growing up, I just always worked towards this big dream of that one day I would go to University of Seas, and the rest was just blank. Every time I thought about life, I suppose, I could picture myself being 16 and being in the same school that I was studying in at the time, because my school had grades all the way to matric, to the last year. I could picture going to I would call it matric dance. I suppose it's like prom, with the friends that I had beside me, because, we're in the same school at 5 years old. Why wouldn't we be in the same school at 18? But from 18 onwards, things were just blank. It was literally like a blank sheet of paper in my head, except it wasn't just a sheet of paper, it was a void. And I never thought much about it, and I never had much reason to think much about it, I suppose. But I remember so clearly the day that had changed for me. I was standing outside a mutual friend's apartment with another friend that I had made during my first week in Amsterdam. And we weren't that close then, but we started chatting, and it was quite late at night. I think the time must have been around 11 p.m., 10, 11 p.m., I suppose. We spent the day solving puzzles together as a group, and it was just the two of us left at that point. And we just started talking and talking and talking, and soon, the world was still, and it was just the two of us standing with our bikes in the cold of night, chatting. And I remember he was indirectly telling me what his life had been like for the past year and a half, because that's how long we'd both been in Amsterdam for at that point. And the things that he had been doing, and the things he discovered, the things he had learned, the things you could do, the things he wanted to do in the city. And it blew my mind, because I know that we had been both living in Amsterdam for a year and a half at that point, and we both came at the same time. We had similar backgrounds, in the sense that we both came from, mind the ambulance. In the sense that we both came from, countries that were far, far away, and we studied the same program, came at the same time. But in hearing him speak about the Amsterdam he had lived in, I wanted to live where he had lived. And then we started chatting more, and for the first time, I got excited about the future. For the first time, I started being able to picture it. We started talking about how exciting it was to wait till the day that our peers would be in positions of power, and what the world would look like then. Entrusting their upbringing with the values of equality and I don't know, just niceness, I suppose, that just didn't exist before. And I remember just being so excited. And in that moment, I started picturing the future for myself in so many other ways, and picturing these friends that I had made, and seeing them again, and just, going through life with them for the next 10 years. For the first time, I started being able to picture myself at, 25 years old, and living in a cheap apartment, but doing silly things with friends, and just loving life. And at 35 years old, possibly having my second child with my lifelong partner and being a little more financially stable. And then at 45, in a different country, to experience new things with my family. And at 55, when I'd quote unquote be free again, because my children would be in university at that point, and so on and so forth, I could actually picture a future. And in that moment, I just felt so at peace, so uncontainably happy, but more importantly, so serene. And what made the moment even more special was that the friend I was with, so happy that someone was seeing the world as they had seen it for such a long time, that they were moved to tears. Because I think that, at least at that time, that was a goal they had, just to get people to see the world as they saw it. And I suppose that's what I'm sort of trying to do now with this podcast episode, to show you the world as I see it a little bit. And basically from then on, I began to fall in love with the city and with life. And more than anything, I wanted to get other people to see it the way I did. And I don't necessarily think I've been the reason why at least my peers around me have started to love Amsterdam more and more, but it brings me so much joy to hear them say things like, oh, I just went back to my home country, and for the first time I found myself really missing Amsterdam and being really eager to come back. This friend that I was with also introduced me to this idea of a feeling like they were born the day they came to Amsterdam, because that's when their life actually started, and I fully, wholeheartedly concur with that idea. I really feel like just everything began from the second I stepped foot here. There's all the cliche things of, I'm starting to learn things about myself. I got to experience living on my own, going grocery shopping on my own, and doing these things. But more than that, I've got to experience happiness in in such enormous quantities that I genuinely didn't believe were possible. And I've got to have all these experiences that I didn't know I always wanted, and definitely on some levels I didn't believe were actually going to happen, because again, I never pictured a future. And it's these small things. It's like how we often all bike as a group of friends to someone's house to cook dinner and then eat and drink together, and in those moments I sit there and I feel like I'm just an observer outside of my own body, just watching this group, and I can't believe that it's actually happening, that I'm actually there, and just how wonderful it is. It's like spontaneously buying cheap bus tickets to take a solo birthday trip to a foreign country because I can. People always say that, oh, they're going to travel the world, but I genuinely, I think I just didn't believe that it was real. I love living through these cliches. I love these mundane, sort of ordinary, no big deal things, capital NBD, these no big deal things. Like how one random day, my friend in this trio of friends suddenly called and said that they were bleaching their hair, and I biked as fast as I could to them to see their whole head purple from the shampoo and eventually white from the bleach, and just having such a laugh with all the people that were there. And all the times I've done these cool, fun, and quirky things like going to a community kitchen or a storytelling night or a comedy show, just things I didn't know I wanted to do. These dreams that I didn't know I had coming true. I remember feelings very vividly, like how touched I felt last night when my friend came late at night after her long work shift to bring me medicine that I'd finally asked for. And she came with a whole dinner from the restaurant she was working at and a pack of nachos, what are they? Clementines, mandarins, and a bag of lemons and a box of tea and chocolates with the medicine. I remember the feeling of chatting with with Caleb really late into the night and getting home and getting a text from him asking if I was interested in starting a podcast with him. And I felt so honored in that moment that, wow, someone wants to do this. This is, I can't describe it. Oh, and the feeling of thinking an asteroid was coming to hit us with me and my then boyfriend, and just feeling ready to die because I was so happy I could die, and I didn't believe it was possible. There are all these things that just make me love this place more and more. It's like being able to buy one piece of chicken from the butcher at a price that's cheaper than the supermarket and fresher and tastier than the supermarket, and cooking it immediately as I get home with all the other groceries I just bought on the spot for this one meal. Because my whole life I've had to thaw rock hard frozen chicken breast from a mega pack of 24, and planning things in advance and not having the freedom to grocery shop immediately, and always doing it at bulk with a car when we had the chance. Or even taking the trash out any day of the week. It's such a luxury to me because I didn't realize before that we were so dependent on the weekly garbage man schedule and having to lug this crazy heavy plastic garbage bin down this really steep hill that we lived on at 6 in the morning before we went to school, and then lugging it back at the end of the day. And of course, the freedom to go anywhere I want at any time of day or night. And quite literally, because with my bike, I could probably bike to Brussels, and I plan to. I'm saying this here and now as proof to my future self because this is something that scares me. Well, do you know what? It makes me nervous, and what nervous really means is just excited. Scared but excited. That's what nervous means. And I'm nervous basically every single day in the best and, in some ways, worst ways possible, because I'm pretty much just scared every day. This is the city of the first time, the first time of everything. The first time I went on a date. The first time I've fallen in love. The first time I've been an extra on a film set, because that's what came to my mind. And all these things just add to the specialness of it all. I'm so in love with the mundane and the ordinary of the ordinary. I often think of Amy Krauss Rosenthal and what she wrote about ordinary things, about how if we were to leave everything we know now, just the whole world behind, and far into the future we suddenly had one day to come back, the things we'd really appreciate would be, the imperfections in life, the cracks in the sidewalk, the chips in the bricks, the raindrop stained windows, and we just stare at like dirt and just think, oh my god, dirt. It's just awesome. Look at this dirt. And I don't know, time makes us so easily numb to beauty, and I don't want to be someone who falls into that too often. I love the little imperfections in life, the proof that we were here and we are here. Like how most of my jeans have a bike chain grease stain on the inner right pant leg because of all the times I've ridden my bike, or how my laptop has dents from the day I got it because of how quickly I was biking to rush to see my friends, and then someone T-boned me and I flew off my bike and I arrived to my friends all bloody and sweaty. I know a lot of my naivete right now could enjoy, could just be attributed to me looking back one day and thinking, oh, I loved my university days, but I really think it's not that. I think it's the fact that they've happened here in the city. I think that's what I'll remember most fondly and why the city is so special to me. The fact that I'm here now and we're all here now and everything is happening. I can't put it better. And that's why it's fun to have these friends to do all these things with, on top of doing these things on your own. It's the fact that they're like witnesses to your life. I don't know, something about that. So this podcast was really just a reminder for myself to look up, because sometimes I forget to look up. When the city hates me, it really hates me. It kicks me out of a house because of a banana. It puts me through the worst heartbreak I've ever gone through. And all the times I've thought that it was the end of the world. But I don't know. The city has my heart. And it's nice to remember just how wonderful. Just that. That's how I'm going to end this. Just how wonderful.